Ethiopia. The African Union marked its 28th anniversary on July the 9th. That'll be a month and a month old tomorrow, and the debate about the effectiveness of the union is on the table again. Established in 2002 with 53 African nations as members, the AU became the successor to the Organization of African Unity, which was formed in 1963. As the African Union turned 20, questions have been asked about the objectives of the Union, its aspirations, goals, and the scorecards. Let's cross now to Joseph Ochieno in London. He's an international journalist and a development economist. Great to have you to connect with us this evening. Thank you so much, sir, for coming through. How would you describe the 20 years of the African Union as a Pan-African leadership organization? This is an organization you've reported for most of your career as a journalist.
And same to you, boss. I'm good seeing you. You can see bits of my background is work. And part of the work is regeneration in a major project, which these guys thought maybe need to be reviewed, and it's particularly in an Africanist area south of London. But as far as the African Union is concerned, many of us thought that there was no need to change the names and to change the focus. But it was possibly the case that they thought that they'd be looking forward. The last 20 years, honestly, I do not know what anybody can pick very specifically to say that's African Union's progress beyond perhaps the recognition newly of the African diaspora, the emphasis of Africa beyond the borders of the continent. Beyond that, I really genuinely don't know. You know, these guys talked about emphasizing sovereignty, emphasizing independence, emphasizing very deliberately this quest against, external exploitation, or call it colonialism or whatever the case. By and large, it's not different from what the African Organization of African Unity was. I think what I would have liked to see the AU do, particularly after the independence of South Africa, Namibia, Angola, and Zimbabwe, and Mozambique, was that, well, we would, in a new phase in which African leaders talk more about African development, talk about more about African unity, talk about more about the things that concern average African youth today, by and large education and jobs, talk about the environment, talk about reclaiming in terms of ownership of what really belongs to us, including the quest for African land, say, for instance, when Zimbabwe was rather lonely on that. And to do so in such a manner that perhaps today we would be much more moving towards one Africa government. And if that was happening, we would have a situation in which the war in Congo would be a war which is tabled at the African Union, chaired by a big African name. Bossam, you and I today, I don't know which big African name you can count, 1, 2, 3, or you can mention that really are the guys in Africa who simply say, this is the direction in which our continent is going. None of those is there. So to me, from that point of view, it's extremely disappointing.
So do you think the AU had lived up to the main charter and the 4 goals that it set for itself? You know, in 2002, when the organization of the OAU, which was formed in 1963, gave way to the African Union, it became like the League of Nations. Then you have the United Nations after that. So, do you think it's lived up to that, those charter and those 4 key goals?
I think I sort of lost you there. Do you mind repeating the question? I don't think I got you very clearly, Rosen. Sorry.
Yeah, I was talking about the African Union, if it has lived up to its main charter. You know, those 4 goals it sets for itself, when you consider that in 2002, everyone, we were all enthused that we have an African Union that's going to be really different from the OAU, which was formed in 1963.
Yes. No, as I said, that is what I was trying to say, that beyond, if you consider what the big guys are, the founding parents of the Organization of African Unity faced, they faced the Cold War, they faced most of the countries which are not yet independent. They faced a population that was by and large not yet sufficiently educated and not exposed like you and me. They faced huge amount of challenges, and yet these guys did them by and large relatively well. From 2002, thereabout in the last 20 years, the world has changed, the world of technology, the world of development, the world which has now grown smaller and thinner. But instead, Africa has actually seen much more migration into Africa in terms of foreign capital that comes out of Africa to get economics come and do also figures in the statistics about development and national economic growth. But if you go into the details, you really find that Africa has sold itself slightly more externally than it investing in the future. But that's here to say. The youth of Africa today, anyway, are waking up. I genuinely just believe that the African Union of tomorrow is going to be much better, much hopeful, much possible than the current crop of African Union, if you want to put it as a pocket. So that is my hope. But generally, if it's about an assessment of the last 20 years, as I said, I just genuinely don't know what the august body as an organization did that I could actually say that it was progress beyond what the founding parents really sought to do.
So when we say the European Union against the African Union, give me a little comparison about the two. Would you compare both of them? What makes a big difference?
I think you're very, very right, because that's actually very interesting. That's very interesting, because the European Union is, while the African Union is top-down approach, the European Union are generally institutional. A European court of law will take a position, run with it, and will impose it on member states, and nation states will follow. The African Union, it is what the leaders say. Many of these leaders are either unelected, elected dubiously, and in many cases, I'm yet to wait for a time when a particular African nation is challenging either a legislation locally in their country, or perhaps, God willing, elections taking place like the one in Kenya tomorrow, and there's a sufficient satisfaction domestically, and you say that, well, you take it to an African Union court, or even perhaps African Union political court of public opinion in Addis Ababa, and get an outcome. You're unlikely to do that. So from that point of view, the AU, by and large, is a better organization because it's institutionally entrenched. But that said, actually, it's very interesting. I was actually having a conversation over the East African community recently. And, the British Prime Minister Ted Heath of the time actually said very publicly that when they're building the European Economic Community at the time, they did it looking at what model the East African community at the time was looking like, an organization founded in 1967 and that collapsed with the coming of Idi Amin. So if the European Union could have been looking at Africa at the time, I don't know what our civil servants, whether at AU or foreign offices, foreign office departments, yes, whether in Lagos, Nigeria, or Kampala, or Nairobi, are thinking of doing. Perhaps many of them actually don't have a clue that it was once possible that African leaders could think, and African civil servants could think strategically for Africa going forward, but that is not possibly the case that you're going to listen to and follow and agree.
Mr. Ochieno, to sum it up, Kenyans go to the polls tomorrow in a general election. Give me your take on this important development tomorrow.
Extremely important, my brother, and good wishes and best wishes to the Kenyan people. You and I covered, and you know what happened during the post-election violence in Kenya. That has always been talked about. But Kenya has moved on substantially. Kenyan politics has moved on. The foes, enemies and opponents have been moving together. The most extraordinary alliance is one which is now between President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, which is possibly likely to be the winning team. But whatever the case, Vice President, Deputy President Ruto is giving Raila a big run for his money. So this thing is not over until it's over. But likely, very likely, there will be an outcome tomorrow, a rather decisive outcome. The interesting thing, though, is, as people are saying, you don't see police beating up people like it was the case in Kampala last year. So for that reason, best wishes and good luck to our Kenyan brethren.
We're going to touch base with you after the elections in Nairobi, Joseph Ochieno. So keep your hat on and keep your eyes on the Kenyan election. We'll touch base with you before the end of the week from tomorrow, Tuesday.